The great ship, the celestial Airy, was quiet in its night cycle. The harsh white lights that lit the endless silver corridors during the day were now a dim, blue glow. For most of the Draconian crew, this was a time for rest or focused solitary study. For Princess Erin, it was a time to walk. Her steps were soft on the cool metal floor. Her purple scales, the color of a deep twilight sky, seemed to absorb the low light. She moved without sound, a shadow in the dim hallways. She had just finished her evening combat drills. Her body was tired, but her mind was awake. It was always awake. As the heir to the Draconian Fleet Command, her mind was a tool to be sharpened, always thinking, always analyzing. Tonight, her analysis was drawn to the humans. The celestial Airy had a small human contingent. They were specialists, botanists, engineers, and maintenance workers. To her people, they were useful but fragile. They had strange, soft traditions and emotional complexities that Draconians saw as a weakness. That as she passed the entrance to the human crew quarters, she saw two of them. A woman named Sumin, who worked in the plant-growing labs, and a man named June, from engineering. They were speaking in low voices. Erin's excellent hearing picked up their words. "Miss the snow," Sumin was saying, a sad smile on her face. "Just the sound of it, the quiet." June nodded, his hands in his pockets. "My mother would make songpine tonight. The whole house would smell like pine needles and sesame. It's not the same, just marking it on a duty roster." "Merry Christmas, June," Sumin said softly, touching his arm. "Yeah, Merry Christmas, Sumin. Try to dream of home." They parted ways, their shoulders slumped slightly. Erin watched them go. The word hung in the air. Christmas. She had heard it in human data files. A Terran winter solstice festival. It involved gift-giving and social rituals. Logically, it seemed like a simple cultural exercise. But the feeling in the corridor just now was not simple. It was a thick, heavy feeling. It was not the sharp grief of a lost battle, but a dull, aching emptiness. Why would a celebration cause such a look of loss? Curiosity, a trait her teachers both encouraged and warned her about, pulled her forward. She did not go back to her royal chambers. Instead, she walked towards the outer rings of the ship, where the observation decks were. They were rarely used. Draconians saw the stars as points of navigation, not things of beauty. The deck was a half-sphere of clear crystal looking out into the endless black. The swirling colors of the Helix Nebula filled the view, a giant, silent storm of pink and blue gas. And there, in the center of the room, was a man. She knew him.
Kim Tae-sung,
A senior custodian. He was a quiet, older human who had been on the ship for many cycles. His hair was more gray than black, and his face had lines that spoke of time and quiet thought. He was not looking at the nebula. He was cleaning the massive viewport with a soft cloth and a spray bottle that fogged the surface. His movements were slow, careful, and perfect. Every sweep of his arm was the same length. Every wipe left the crystal spotless. Erin stood in the doorway, silent. She watched him work. He finished a large section and stepped back, his eyes finally lifting to the stars. But he wasn't looking at the stars either. His reflection was clear in the clean glass. His face, lit by the nebula's gentle light, was calm. But his eyes were far, far away. He wasn't on the ship. There was no expression of sadness, no tears. It was something deeper, a complete and total absence. He was a man standing in a room, but his spirit was in another place, another time. It was the most profound loneliness Erin had ever seen, and it was expressed in perfect stillness. She found it fascinating. Draconians felt pride, anger, determination, honor. This was different. This was a deep ocean under a still surface. She moved, her feet finally making a slight sound on the floor. Taesung started, his body tensing. He turned and saw her. Immediately, he bowed his head, placing his hands at his sides. "Your Highness, I apologize. I did not hear you enter. I will leave you to the observation deck." "You will stay," Erin said, her voice clear but not harsh. She walked to the viewport, standing beside him. The nebula was truly immense. You clean this deck every night cycle. It is my scheduled duty, Your Highness. But you always stop. You always look. And you do not see the nebula. She turned her head, her golden eyes fixing on him. What do you see? Taesung was quiet for a moment. He was not used to conversation with royalty. I see light in the darkness, Your Highness. That is a description of the nebula. It is not what you see. She gestured to the reflection in the glass. Your face tells a different story. The humans today spoke of Christmas. They were sad. You are absent. What is this day that it takes humans away from the present? Is it a day of mourning? Taesung took a slow breath. He looked at the princess. She was not accusing him. She was asking a real question. She wanted data. It is not mourning, Your Highness. Or, it is not meant to be. He chose his words with care. Christmas is a memory, a feeling. When you are home, it is a feeling of warmth. When you are not, he looked back at the stars. The memory becomes a shadow. You feel the shape of what is missing. Explain the feeling, Aaron commanded, but her tone was one of curiosity. How does one explain a color to someone who has never seen it? He said softly, then straightened, realizing he might have overstepped. I am sorry. It is a feeling of light, as I said, but a small, warm light, like a single candle in a big, dark room. It is the feeling of being safe inside when a cold wind blows outside. It is giving a gift to someone and expecting nothing back, not even thanks. It is a story about a quiet night, a humble beginning, and the idea that kindness is the strongest thing in the universe. Aaron stared at him. His words painted pictures in her mind that made no strategic sense. A candle is weaker than a floodlight. Safety is a tactical consideration. Gifts build alliances or create debt. She tilted her head. You celebrate the idea of gentleness as a strength. Taesung allowed himself a small, very faint smile. It did not reach his faraway eyes. We celebrate the hope, Your Highness, he said. The hope that it can exist. Even here. Even now. He bowed again, picked up his cleaning kit, and left the princess alone in the vast, silent room with the fantastic, frozen explosion of color outside. She looked at the nebula. She tried to see a candle. She could not. But for the first time, she wondered what it would be like to feel the cold wind, just to understand the value of the warmth inside. The observation deck felt different after Kim Taesung left. The silence was no longer just an absence of sound. It was now filled with the echo of his words. Candle. A cold wind. A gift expecting nothing back. Princess Erin stood before the great window, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. The Helix Nebula continued its slow, magnificent turn. 1 billion miles of burning gas. It was a spectacle of raw power. But the human custodian had called it a frozen firework. He had seen celebration where she saw only cosmic force. She finally turned and walked back to her quarters. The rooms were large, beautifully ordered, and cold. Everything had a purpose. The hard chair was for posture. The simple bed was for efficient rest. The data screen was for study. On a shelf sat gifts from various diplomatic missions. A polished mineral from a mining world, a dagger from a warrior clan, a treatise on stellar physics. Each was a symbol of alliance, of respect, or of expected favor. She had never received a gift that was simply a gift. The idea would not leave her. It was a puzzle with no clear solution. As a strategist, she was trained to understand the motives of other species. But this motive made no sense. Why create a tradition centered on vulnerability? Why focus on light when you could focus on strength? The next day, during her historical tactics tutorial, her mind wandered. The instructor, an older draconian with scales the color of iron, discussed the Battle of the Silent Void. It was a famous victory where the draconian fleet used the cold and the darkness of a nebula as cover for an ambush. The environment was a weapon, the instructor stated. The cold weakened the enemy's shields. The darkness hid our approach. We used the harshness of the universe to our advantage. Aaron listened, but a part of her thought. Taesung spoke of a light in the winter dark, not as a weapon, as an answer. It was a completely opposite way of thinking. Was it weakness? Or was it a different kind of strategy? A strategy for the soul, not for the ship. Her feet took her back to the outer rings that evening. She did not plan it. She just found herself walking the quiet, dim corridors. She wondered if Kim Taesung would be there again, chasing memories with his cloth and spray bottle. He was. The scene was almost the same. The soft hiss of his spray, the careful swipe of the cloth, the look of distant quiet on his face in the glass. This time, she did not wait in the doorway. "Custodian Kim," she said. Announcing her presence, he turned, less startled than before, and bowed. "Your Highness, I have considered your explanation," Aaron said, walking to stand beside him. She looked at their reflections, the tall, regal draconian and the smaller, weary human. "It is illogical."
Taesung nodded slowly.
"I suppose it is, Your Highness. Yet it persists, across centuries and now across stars. Your people cling to this feeling." She turned from the window to look directly at him. "You described the hope that gentleness can exist. I wish to understand the hope itself. I have reviewed data files on Christmas. They list customs, decorated trees, gift exchange, specific songs, shared meals. These are actions. I do not understand the feeling that connects them." Taesung was silent for a long moment. He looked at his cloth, then out at the stars. "It is the feeling of connection, Your Highness. A deep breath on a cold night that makes you see the air. It is knowing someone has thought of you, not because they need you, but just because you exist in their world. It is the warmth of a shared silence that is not empty." Aaron's tail, which usually lay still, gave a slow, thoughtful twitch. "A shared silence," she repeated. Her life was full of silence. The silent corridors, the silent study, the silent respect of her guards. It was never shared. It was just alone. "The story you mentioned, the quiet night, the humble beginning. What is its purpose? Is it a historical record?" "It is a seed," Taesung said, struggling for the right words. "A story planted long ago to grow the idea that great things can have small, quiet beginnings. That majesty does not always shout. Sometimes it just is. Majesty that does not shout." Aaron looked at her own reflection. Her purple scales, her sharp features, the inherent authority in her posture. Her majesty was meant to be seen. It was meant to command. The idea of a quiet, humble majesty was completely foreign. A new feeling rose in her chest. It was not curiosity now. It was a deep, aching want. She did not want more data. She did not want a list of customs. She wanted to know. She wanted to touch this feeling that made humans look at the void with sad, faraway eyes. She wanted to understand the warmth they remembered. Her voice, when she spoke again, was lower. She did not command. She asked. It was a strange sensation on her tongue.
Kim Taesung.
"I have a request." He looked up, his eyes wary. "Your Highness, do not show me the data. Do not tell me the stories." She took a small step closer, her golden eyes intense. "Show me the feeling, just for a moment. Make me understand this Christmas." Taesung's face went pale. He looked around the empty observation deck as if afraid the walls themselves were listening. "Your Highness, I cannot. It is not my place. The captain, your father—" "My father does not need to know," Aaron said, the statement feeling like a rebellion. "This is not a matter of state. This is a personal inquiry." "But there is nothing to show," he said, a hint of desperation in his voice. "It is not a weapon or a machine. It is bits and pieces. It is making something from nothing because the making itself is the point. Here on this ship I have nothing. No tree, no family, no special food." Aaron looked at him, at his honest fear. She saw not a disobedient servant, but a man afraid of failing a task he cared about. She saw the depth of his feeling, and it only made her want to understand it more. "You have your memories," she stated. "And you have this ship. and you have a customer. Who is asking? She used the human word carefully. Please. That single word, please, hung in the air between them. It was not a word a dragon princess often used. Taesung stared at her. He saw not a royal figure, but a young being, isolated by her own grandeur, asking a simple, impossible thing, to feel connected. He closed his eyes for a second, the weight of her request settling on him. When he opened them, there was a new resolve, mixed with deep worry. It will not be what the stories say, he warned quietly. I am not asking for a story, Aaron said. I am asking for the quiet night. Kim Taesung walked back to his small custodial closet, his heart beating too fast. The princess's request echoed in his mind. Show me the feeling. It was an impossible thing. Christmas was not a lesson. It was a living memory, a collection of smells and tastes and sounds that lived in your bones. Out here, there was only metal, recycled air, and the humming of the ship. He sat on a low stool, his cleaning supplies neatly organized on the shelves around him. He felt a pressure he had not felt in years. It was not the pressure of a difficult job, but the pressure of sharing something precious and fragile. If he did this wrong, he would not just disappoint a princess. He would fail the memory itself. He thought of his daughter, Sua, back on Earth. She would be a young woman now. He remembered her wide eyes on Christmas morning, not just for the gifts, but for the magic of it all. The soft glow of the tree lights in the pre-dawn dark. The smell of toasted rice cake soup, the tekguk that meant you were a year older. His wife's laughter. That was the feeling. How could he possibly rebuild that from ship parts and spare moments? He knew he could not do it alone. And he knew he should not do it at all. Captain Voran's stern, scaled face flashed in his mind. The draconian leader had little patience for what he called human sentimental clutter. This could be seen as a terrible overstep. Taesung could lose his position, his place on the ship. But then he saw Princess Erin's eyes. They held not command, but a genuine, lonely hunger. He had seen that look before in the mirror. It was the look of someone who knew what they were missing, even if they had never had it. His own sense of loneliness reached out to hers. He made a decision. The next day, during his break, he went to the hydroponics bay. It was a warm, humid room full of the green smell of growing plants. Su Min, the botanist, was checking the nutrient levels on a tank of leafy greens. Su Min SSI, Taesung said, his voice quiet. Can I ask for your help? It is a strange thing. Su Min looked up, wiping her hands.
Taesung si sesi.
Of course. What do you need? He explained, haltingly, about the princess's request. He did not call it Christmas. He called it a human remembrance ritual. He said the princess wanted to understand the atmosphere. That Su Min listened, her expression growing first surprised, then thoughtful. You want to create the feeling here? On this metal barge? She let out a soft breath, looking at her plants. Well, we have no pine trees, but the maintenance simpine in Sector 7G. It is not for eating. It is just for air quality. These clippings have a scent. A clean, green scent. That would be something? Taesung said, hope flickering. I will get you some clippings, Su Min nodded. And the citrus thyme. Smells like freshness. Like life. Next, Taesung found June in a lower engineering bay, elbow deep in a panel of blinking lights. June, Taesung said. I need a small light, not a work light, a gentle light. June pulled his head out of the panel. A gentle light? What does that mean? Low lumens? Not just low, Taesung said. Warm, and several of them on a string. June scratched his head, looking at Taesung like he was crazy. Then Taesung mentioned, very quietly, that it was for the princess's cultural understanding. June's skepticism faded into pragmatic interest. For the princess? Okay, I can't make fairy lights, but the old indicator strands from the decommissioned shuttle. The small red and green LEDs. They are very low power. I can wire a few together on a single power cell. It will be dim. Is dim okay? Dim is perfect. Taesung said, feeling a wave of gratitude. The hardest part was the gift. The princess had spoken of a gift that expected nothing. What could he possibly give a dragon princess? She had everything. Then he remembered the heart of it. It was not about value. It was about thought. During his cleaning rounds, he saved things. A piece of clean, flexible packing foam from a new equipment crate. A few scraps of soft metal tubing from a broken environmental sensor. In the deep quiet of the night cycle, in his closet, he began to shape them. His tools were simple. A small knife, a file, his hands. He did not plan what he was making. He just let his hands remember. The foam was soft. He carved it slowly, rounding edges, creating a smooth, flowing shape. It began to look like a creature curled in sleep, its head tucked under a wing. He wrapped the thin metal around part of it, like a delicate band. It was abstract. It was not a dragon. It was not anything from a royal crest. It was just a small, sleeping being made to be held in a hand. It was safe. It was at peace. He worked on it over 2 days, hiding it whenever someone passed by. Each stroke of the file was a memory of home. He was not making a decoration. He was making a container for a feeling. Princess Erin, for her part, tried to continue her normal routine, but her focus was scattered. During a diplomatic strategy session, her father, Captain Vorin, noticed. "Your analysis of the Taurian trade proposals lacks depth, Erin," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Your mind is elsewhere. It is a weakness. A leader's focus must be absolute." "Yes, father," she said, lowering her gaze. Her mind, however, was not on trade routes. It was wondering what a gentle light looked like. It was wondering what Kim Taesung was doing. She did not go to the observation deck. She waited. The anticipation was a new feeling. It was not the tense waiting before a battle. It was a curious, fluttering feeling in her chest. She watched the human crew more closely. She saw Sumin carefully wrapping a small bundle of green cuttings in a cloth. She saw June fiddling with a tiny string of lights at his engineering station, testing them so they glowed softly before he quickly shut them off. They were all part of it. This quiet, secret project. For her, it was happening. Because she had asked. Not ordered, but asked. And they had said yes. That, she realized, was the first part of the feeling. It was not a command that created this. It was a request and a willing answer. The connection had already begun. The ship's main chronometer marked the day. It was just another work cycle for the draconian crew. For the humans, it was a day walked through with a quiet, private wait. For Kim Taesung, it was a day of careful, secret movement. He had chosen the place. Not the grand observation deck, which felt too open, too much like a stage. He needed a smaller space. He remembered a disused maintenance conduit near a secondary viewport in the ship's lower ring. It was a cul-de-sac, a dead-end corridor where broken tools were sometimes stored. The viewport was smaller, but it looked out on the same glorious nebula. More importantly, it was hidden, forgotten. It was a humble space. That felt right. During the final hour of the day shift, he worked quickly. He took the bundled clippings from Sumin. They were not much, a few sprigs of the simpine, a handful of the citrus thyme. But when he unwrapped them, the clean, green, slightly sharp smell filled his small custodial closet. It was the smell of life, not recycled air. It was a miracle. He took the string of lights from June. They were just 12 small points of red and green, wired to a tiny, flat power cell. He tested them. They glowed softly, steadily, like distant, friendly stars. They were not bright, but in the dark, they would be everything. Finally, he took the small figure he had made. He had finished it, smoothing every edge with his cloth until the foam felt almost like stone. The thin metal band gleamed dully. He wrapped it in a clean piece of lint-free cloth, the kind he used to polish sensitive screens. Carrying it all in a plain maintenance bag, he made his way to the dead-end conduit. The air here was still and slightly cooler. He got to work. He cleared a small area on the floor, sweeping it meticulously. He placed the clippings in a neat bundle against the wall, where the viewport met the metal. He attached the string of lights above them, carefully taping the wire to a conduit so the little lights hung down, framing the green. He took a small, clean crate from the pile of discarded items and turned it on its end to make a flat surface. He unfolded the cloth and placed the small, sleeping figure on it that he stepped back. It was not a scene from a vid. It was not grand or beautiful. It was a few scraps in a forgotten corner. But to his eyes, in this metal ship millions of miles from home, it was the most honest thing he had ever made. It was a candle in the dark. He hoped it would be enough. He sent a simple, coded message to the princess's private datapad, just a location marker and a time. Then he waited. Princess Erin received the marker. Her heart did a strange, quick beat. She felt a thrill that was not unlike preparing for a tactical exercise, but softer, with no danger attached. She waited until the ship's lights dimmed for the night cycle. She told her guards she was going for a walk to clear her mind. They nodded, used to her solitary walks. She found the lower ring corridor. It was poorly lit and silent. She moved like a shadow, her scales blending into the gloom. She found the open conduit door and stepped inside. The first thing that hit her was the smell. It was subtle, but it cut through the sterile ship air. It was green and fresh and alive. It reminded her of the few planetary gardens she had visited, a memory of growing things. Then she saw the lights point 12 tiny points of color, red and green, glowing warmly above a small bundle of green cuttings. The light they cast was faint, just a soft halo that made the metal walls seem less cold. And in the center, on a crate, was a small, pale shape. Kim Tae-sung stood to the side, his hands folded. He looked nervous. "Your Highness," he said quietly. Erin did not answer immediately. She walked forward slowly, her eyes taking in every detail. She knelt in front of the crate. Up close, she could see the figure clearly. It was a smooth, curved shape, a creature at rest. It was not fearsome or powerful. It was gentle. She reached out a careful hand, her claw-tipped fingers hovering over it. She looked at Tae-sung. "You may touch it," he said. "It is for you." She picked it up. It was lighter than she expected. The foam was smooth under her touch. The metal band was cool. She held it in her palm. It was a thing made by hand, not by a machine. She could see the tiny marks of the file. It was a gift that had required time and thought. It expected nothing. She simply held it, feeling its weightlessness, its peace. "This is the gift?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It is one part," Tae-sung said. He then reached into his bag and pulled out 2 simple nutrition bars from the human mess. But he had unwrapped them and placed each one on a small, clean square of white cloth. He offered one to her. "This is another part, a shared meal, however modest." Erin took the cloth. The bar was ordinary, the same as she had eaten before. But it was not on a tray. It was on a cloth offered. She looked at Tae-sung as he sat on the floor a respectful distance away, and she slowly sat as well, her back against the cool wall. They ate in silence, looking at the little lights and the nebula beyond the small viewport. After a moment, Tae-sung took out his personal data slate. "The last part is a sound," he said. He tapped the screen. A simple melody began to play. It was not grand orchestra music. It was a single, soft instrument, a flute perhaps, playing a slow, flowing, gentle tune. It was an old Korean carol. A baby in a manger sleeps. The melody was like water, sad and hopeful all at once. It filled the small space, mixing with the scent of green things. Erin sat still, the simple food in her hand, the small figure in her lap, the soft lights in her eyes, the gentle music in her ears, the clean, living smell in her nose. She felt full, not in her stomach but in her spirit. The heavy silence of her royal life was gone. This silence was different. This silence was shared. It was warm. It was the quiet night he had spoken of. She didn't feel a burst of joy. She felt a deep, settling calm. Connection. She was a princess on a starship, holding a piece of foam, and for the first time, she felt not alone. She felt the feeling. It was small, like the little lights, but in the immense darkness of space, it was everything. She looked at Tae-sung, and for the first time, she gave a slow, careful nod that was not royal approval, but human understanding. "I see," she said softly. "I see the light." The music from the data slate came to a gentle end. The last note hung in the quiet air of the conduit, mixing with the scent of the green cuttings. Princess Erin sat perfectly still, the small figure cradled in her hand. The feeling of calm was so deep, so new, she was afraid to move and break it. She looked from the soft lights to Kim Tae-sung's face. The distant, empty look he usually had was gone. Now he just looked tired, but peaceful. He had shared a burden, and it had lightened. "Thank you, Kim Tae-sung," she said. The words felt insufficient, but they were true. He bowed his head where he Saturday. "Thank you for asking, Your Highness." She was about to speak again, to ask about the melody or the making of the figure, when the world shattered. The conduit door, which had been left slightly open, was suddenly filled with a massive, dark shape. The air grew tense and cold. Captain Voran stood in the doorway, his bronze scales seeming to absorb the gentle light from the LEDs, turning them harsh. His eyes, gold like his daughter's but without a hint of softness, swept over the scene. They took in the tiny lights, the bundled plants, the crude crate, his daughter sitting on the floor with a human custodian, holding a piece of scrap foam. His expression did not change. It was like a mountain looking at a few grains of sand. But his tail gave a single, sharp crack against the metal doorframe, a sound like a gunshot in the small space. Erin moved instantly, shifting from a sitting position to a kneeling one, back straight, head lowered in respect. "Father!" Tae-sung scrambled to his feet, then dropped into a deep bow, his forehead almost touching his knees. "Captain Voran." The captain took 2 steps into the conduit. His presence made the space feel tiny and suffocating. He ignored his daughter for a moment, his gaze burning into the top of Tae-sung's bowed head. "Custodian." Voran's voice was a low, dangerous rumble, like grinding stone. "Explain this display." Tae-sung's mouth was dry. "Captain, I was only—" The princess asked to understand a human cultural. "I did not ask for a dialogue," Voran interrupted, his voice cutting through the air. "I asked for an explanation of why a member of my crew is engaging in primitive superstition with the heir to the fleet command." He turned his gaze to the bundled cuttings, his lip curling slightly. "You bring organic decay onto my clean ship. You waste power on decorative frivolity." His eyes landed on the figure in Erin's hand. "And you present the princess with garbage." Erin's hand closed protectively around the figure. "Father, it was my request. I wish to understand. There is value in—" "Silence," Voran said, not raising his voice, but the command was absolute. He looked back at Tae-sung. "You have overstepped. You have confused curiosity with permission. You have forgotten your place." Tae-sung said nothing. There was nothing to say. The captain saw not a moment of connection, but an act of rebellion and disrespect. "Your service to the royal wing is terminated," Voran stated, his tone final. "You will report to Waste Reclamation Supervisor Han at the start of the next cycle. Your duties will involve the processing of biological and material refuse. Perhaps there you will better understand the nature of the objects you value." It was a brutal demotion. Waste reclamation was the lowest, most thankless job on the ship, dealing with the literal dirt and discard of the crew. It was a statement, clear as ice. The captain saw Tae-sung's actions, and the feeling he had tried to share, as nothing more than trash. "Father, no." Erin rose to her feet, her own voice sharp. "This is unjust. He acted on my direct wish. Punish me, not him." Voran finally looked at his daughter fully. "You are punished," he said coldly, "by seeing the consequence of your blurred judgment. A leader's whims have weight, Erin. This human confused your intellectual curiosity for an endorsement of his backward traditions. He is lucky I do not have him spaced." He gestured to the small setup. "This ends. Now." He turned to 2 draconian guards who had appeared silently behind him. "Clear this conduit. Return all non-regulation items to the recycling processors." He looked one last time at the little string of lights, his expression one of pure contempt. Then he turned and left, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. The guards moved in. One carefully pulled the string of lights down, coiling the wire without a glance. The other scooped up the bundle of cuttings. They did it efficiently without malice, which made it worse. They were just removing clutter. One guard looked at Erin, then at the figure still clenched in her hand. "Your Highness," he said, his voice respectfully neutral. He held out his hand. Erin felt a fire ignite in her chest. It was a draconian fire, a fire of pride and fury. For a second, she wanted to defy him, to snarl. But she saw Taesung, still bowed, defeated. A direct defiance would only make his punishment worse. With a stiffness that hurt her joints, she opened her hand and placed the small, sleeping figure into the guard's large, scaly palm. He nodded and placed it with the cuttings. In moments, the conduit was bare again. Just metal walls, a cold viewport, and the scent of green things already fading from the recycled air. The guard with the items left. The other remained at the door, a silent sentinel ensuring the captain's order was complete. Taesung slowly straightened. He looked old. The peace he had found was gone, replaced by a weary emptiness. He did not look at Erin. He just bowed again, deeply, to the empty space where the captain had been, then to her. "Your Highness," he murmured. Then he walked out, past the guard. His shoulders slumped, heading back to his closet to collect his things for his new life in the ship's belly. Erin was left alone in the empty, cold space. The nebula outside was as beautiful as ever. But the candle had been snuffed out. The warmth was gone. The connection was severed. The only thing left was the hollow, aching shape of what was missing, and the cold, hard lesson from her father. That gentleness was not a strength. It was a weakness that got crushed. She stood there for a long time, until the guard gently reminded her it was time to return to her quarters. She walked back, the silence around her louder and more lonely than ever before. The next day, the celestial Airy operated with its usual perfect efficiency. The night's incident in the maintenance conduit was not spoken of. It was as if it had never happened. Captain Voren presided over the morning briefing, his voice steady and strong, outlining mineral yields from a recently surveyed asteroid field. Princess Erin sat beside him, her posture flawless, her face a mask of calm attention. Inside, she was a storm. The hollow feeling from the night before had hardened overnight. It was no longer sadness. It was a cold, sharp anger, and beneath that, a crystal-clear understanding. Her father saw the world in terms of use. Useful alliances, useful strategies, useful crew. What was not useful was discarded. Kim Taesung's feeling, his light in the dark, had been deemed useless, and so it had been thrown away. But Erin had held that light. She had felt its warmth. She knew its value. Her father was wrong. The understanding did not calm her. It focused her. She thought of the human words Taesung had used. Connection. A gift expecting nothing. Quiet night. They were not weak words. They were precise words for a different kind of strength. A strength her people had forgotten, if they ever knew it. A strength that could bridge species, that could turn a lonely princess and a sad custodian into something that felt like family, if only for a moment. The opportunity came sooner than she expected. A delegation of human diplomats from a nearby trade station was due for a routine courtesy visit. It was a minor event usually handled by a mid-level officer. Captain Voren, however, decided to include Erin. "Observe the formalities," he told her. "Note their negotiating style. It is good practice." The meeting took place in a stark conference room. The humans, 2 men and a woman, wore neat, dark suits. They exchanged polite greetings with Captain Voren, discussing supply routes and communication protocols. The conversation was dry, functional. Erin watched, saying nothing. As the meeting was drawing to a close, Captain Voren gave a small, dismissive nod. "Your cultural idiosyncrasies are, as ever, noted. We appreciate the efficiency of your logistical updates." One of the human diplomats, an older man with a kind face, smiled slightly. "We do try to be efficient. Though, if you'll permit a small personal note, It is a difficult day for many of our crew. The holiday season is a time for family. Being so far from home, the heart feels the distance. He said it without self-pity, just as a simple fact. Captain Voran's expression did not change. Sentiment is a luxury for stable orbits. We are a ship in the deep black. Discipline is our family. It was the perfect thing for him to say. It was strong, draconian, and it ended the conversation. But as he finished speaking, Erin felt the memory of the previous night surge within her. The taste of the nutrition bar on cloth, the smell of green, the soft glow on Kim Tae-sung's weary face. She saw the human diplomat's polite masks tighten just a fraction, a flicker of shared loneliness in their eyes. Before she even knew she was going to speak, she stood up. Every eye in the room turned to her. Captain Voran's gaze was one of mild surprise. "Captain, honored guests," Erin began, her voice clear and carrying the royal tone she had been trained to use. But the words she chose were not from any draconian tactical manual. "I have recently been learning about human connections." Her father's eyes narrowed a fraction. "I have learned a word," she continued, looking at the human diplomats. "Hyodo. It is a Korean word. It means the deep respect and duty one has to one's family and ancestors. I saw this in one of your crew. A deep remembering, a loyalty that spans light years." She paused, seeing the diplomat's surprise. "I have learned of Jong, the deep, unspoken bond that forms between people, even unlikely people, through shared experience. It is not a contract. It is a feeling in the heart. And Yun, the invisible thread of connection that ties lives together." She turned now to face her father, though her words were for everyone. "My education has taught me to see strength in power, in discipline, in the hardness of starship hulls. But I have observed a different strength in our human crew. It is the strength to feel Hyodo across the void. It is the strength to build Jong in sterile corridors. It is the strength to see Yun where others see only a duty roster." Her voice grew stronger, losing its formality, becoming passionate. "To understand an ally is to understand their heart, not just their technology. To dismiss the feelings that motivate them is not strength. It is a tactical blindness." The room was utterly silent. Captain Voran was staring at her, his expression unreadable, but a muscle in his jaw twitched. The human diplomats were leaning forward, their professional masks gone, replaced by open, stunned attention. Erin took a final, deep breath. "Therefore, as heir to the Draconian Fleet Command and in the interest of deeper alliance, I make my first royal request." She looked directly at her father. "I request the reinstatement of Custodian Kim Tae-sung, not to royal service but to a new position, cultural liaison to the human crew. His understanding of both our peoples is a strategic resource we have been wasting. He can teach us to see the threads, so we do not accidentally cut them." She sat down. The silence that followed was thicker than the ship's hull. Captain Voran looked from his daughter to the human diplomats, whose faces now showed clear, profound respect. He saw the political reality. To refuse a publicly stated, logically argued royal request in front of allies would make him look stubborn, weak. Erin had not appealed to emotion. She had framed it as strategy. A better strategy than his own. He slowly straightened in his chair. "A novel perspective, Princess," he said, his voice gravelly. He gave a single, sharp nod to the human diplomats. "We value the heart of our alliance. The request is noted and will be processed." It was not a full agreement, but it was not a refusal. It was a retreat. For the first time in her life, Princess Erin had stood against her father's will, not with rebellion, but with a stronger idea. She had used the very feeling he had discarded as a weapon, and she had won. The storm inside her settled into a steady, firm resolve. The light had not been extinguished. It had just moved from a forgotten conduit into the heart of a princess. And it was beginning to grow. The order came down the next day. Kim Tae-sung was reassigned. He was to report to the Human Affairs Office, a small, seldom-used department near the Botanical Gardens. His title was now Provisional Cultural Liaison. It was a victory, but it felt hollow as he packed his few personal items from the custodial closet. The promotion had come from a place of political pressure, not respect. He knew he would be watched. His new office was a shared desk in a corner. His first task, given by a terse draconian administrator, was to compile a report on human non-work social interactions for review. It was cold, clinical. It felt like another way to take the feeling and turn it into data. He was organizing the empty desk drawers when he sensed a presence at the doorway. He turned. Princess Erin stood there. She was not in her formal regalia, but in simpler training clothes. Her purple scales seemed darker in the room's light. In her hand, she held not a data slate, but a small, polished object. "Kim Tae-sung," she said. He stood and bowed. "Your Highness, thank you for the new position." "It is not a gift," she stated, walking into the room. Her voice was her old, clear tone, but her eyes were different. They held the quiet understanding from the conduit. "It is a correction of an error. Your understanding has value. My father sees value in weapons and engines. I have learned to see it in other things." She stopped in front of his desk. She opened her hand. On her palm lay a single scale. It was about the size of her thumb, a perfect, teardrop shape of deep, luminous amethyst. It was smooth as polished stone, catching the light with a soft, inner glow. It was unmistakably one of her own, from the finer plating near her wrist. "This," she said, "is a draconian symbol. When we give a scale, it is a sign of great respect. It means the giver recognizes a strength in the receiver that has changed them. It is a piece of ourselves offered. It expects nothing in return." Tae-sung's breath caught. He looked from the scale to her face. "Your Highness, I cannot accept this. It is too much." "You gave me a piece of shaped foam," Erin said, her head tilting. "You gave me a feeling I did not have a name for. You gave me light in the dark. This," she extended her hand further, "is my light. It is all I have that is truly mine to give. Please, take it." The word "please" again. It held the same power. Slowly, Tae-sung reached out. He took the scale from her palm. It was warm and surprisingly heavy. It felt alive. It was the most valuable thing he had ever held. "You asked me to show you Christmas," Tae-sung said, his voice thick. "I showed you a shadow of it. But you understood the heart. You gave it back to me." Erin nodded. "You said the story was a seed. A small, quiet beginning." She looked around the sparse office, then back at him, her golden eyes bright. "You planted a seed in a forgotten conduit. It grew, not into a tree but into a thread. A yun. Connected me to you, to Sumin, to June. It connected me to my own people in a new way. Now you will help it grow more threads. Here, in this office." Tae-sung closed his hand gently around the scale, feeling its solid warmth. The hollow feeling from his promotion vanished. This was not a political posting. This was a mission, a true one. He had thought his role was to bring a memory to a princess. He was wrong. His role was to be a bridge, and she had just given him the first, strongest piece of that bridge. "I will," he said, and it was a promise. Erin gave a final, slow nod. She did not smile, draconians rarely did, but the calm peace from the conduit returned to her features. "The nebula still burns outside," she said, turning to leave. "But now, inside the celestial eyrie, we have a different kind of fire. Do not let it go out, Liaison Kim." She left him there, standing in his new office, the amethyst scale held tightly in his hand. He looked at the blank walls, the empty desk. But he did not see emptiness anymore. He saw possibility. He saw the beginning of something. Later that cycle, he went to the waste reclamation bay to formally clear his brief, miserable assignment there. Supervisor Han, a burly human, just waved a hand. "Heard you got pulled up. Good luck." As Tae-sung was leaving, he saw a cart of items destined for the recycler. On top of a pile of scrap packaging, he saw a familiar shape. It was the small, sleeping figure he had carved. It was a little dented, the metal band bent, but it was there. The guards had processed it as ordered, But the fastidious recyclers had not yet crushed it. He picked it up. He smoothed the bent metal band with his thumb. It was not garbage. It was a seed, too. He put it in his pocket. That night, in his small crew quarters, he placed the amethyst scale on the shelf above his bed. Next to it, he placed the repaired little figure. The purple scale glowed softly under the room's light. The simple foam figure sat beside it. Quiet and humble. Point one was a symbol of majestic, royal strength, offered in gratitude. The other was a symbol of gentle, handmade peace, given in hope. Together, they told the whole story. The dragon princess had never had a Christmas. But a human custodian had shown her the feeling, and she had transformed it into something new, something that belonged to both of them and to the ship they shared. The light had not been lost. It had just found a new home, and it was just beginning to shine.